had our speaker for the Russell Stover's chocolate. When I announced that he would be the speaker last week, somebody said, "Oh goody, we'll get chocolate." And I said, "Oh, don't tell me." But he came through, so that's awesome. And if you didn't get any, they're supposed to be circulating down the roads. There's some back by the coffee. Jim is going to start out, and I gave him a time limit of 10 minutes because Jim can talk forever. Jim's going to start, and he's going to tell us, take us back to the 70s and what was happening in the 70s and how in the world were they able to land Russell Stover in an agricultural community of only 7,000 people. Jim.
It was all because of me. If you believe that, you believe the truth. Well, I can stick in my neck. Now, is it working?
Yes.
Okay. We have 10 minutes. Kathy says I have to go 10 minutes without swearing. This will be a record. This will be a record. By the way, I brought a picture. This is the only time I knew what I was doing. I was getting pushed into a tree by 3 women. How can you take a year and a half's work and condense it to 10 minutes? It's not possible. So I decided, you notice I'm using technology. I'll get the technology done. You met Bob and Lloyd and Dell are the 3 that are still alive. I'm the 4th, but I'm not much alive. Now, if you really want to know why that plan's here, just listen for a second. I should take a minute for every name. But Bill Sumner, Ed Nelson, Peg O'Neill, Ken Townsend, Joe Stitt, Bob Schmidt, Joe Clark, Russell Alley, Marge McCarty, Ron Henderson, Mary Watt, John Budas, Tom Canfield. Canfield's here, that's how old he is. Barry Flanagan, Jack Pixler, Dick Edmondson, Warren Henderson, Jim Dutcher, Jerry Dome, and Don DeLee. That's the only thing I can just off the top of my head tell you worked on the Stover plant. And the chair is because of these people, not because of me. Stover's got their decision out. Who owns Stover's now?
What's that?
Who owns them?
Lint, a Swiss company.
Okay. It's not even, I don't have to insult him. Stover's leader was a guy named Lewis Ward. Lewis Ward was very much in plant and didn't care anything about what was out of the plant. He was almost anti-social. He was. And he had a sidekick, an engineer named Jack Postal. And Postal was an arrogant poop that just drove us nuts asking for things that we couldn't do. Now, so all you can figure out to do in a 10-minute talk is an anecdote. So let me give you one or two. The first one would be the caissons under the building. That building has got some heavy equipment in it, especially the unrollers. And underneath that slab are 200 caissons. They go down 200 feet, give or take change. And then they flare at the bottom. They come down like a tube and then they flare at the bottom. And so we had to drill a hole 200 feet deep, and then flare at the bottom. The hole had to be big enough to lower a man in a bosun's chair. You know what a bosun's chair is?
Yes.
Okay, we lowered a guy in a bosun's chair all the way down. He had to sweep out the bottom of that caisson. Then we had 2 kids working all night getting the concrete ready. It was in January. No one had ever poured a climb concrete in January. No one had ever worked for Lewis Ward before either. So we had two kids. Ron Henderson's back here. Hold your hand up, Ron. This is his 75th birthday. 75 years old. Anyway, we had to build 200 caissons, and first of all, we didn't have any money. The total city budget was $3 million. And the plant was worth a little over $6. So, yeah, then we had to get a grant. Well, the grant said they would pay for the caissons if it was not part of the plant. It had to be separate from the plant. So we had to pour the caissons up to where they were 2 inches below the ground, and then pour the slab on top of it so that the slab wouldn't be connected to the caisson. The contract we had to sign with the federal government said the Stovers would agree to all of the 64 Civil Rights Act plus the amendments. And Lewis said, I won't sign it. I said, that was it. I said, heck with you. I got to try this without swearing. Anyway, he wouldn't sign it. And so I went back to Washington. I said, come on, it's just a little thing. He said, if I'm going to sign it, it means that I would violate the law by going to revolution, and I'm going to revolt one of these days and shoot the bastards in Washington. The bastards back Anyway, I went to Washington and they said, we won't give you the grant until you, the grant, by the way, was a couple $1 million. We won't give you the grant until you get him to sign an agreement. Back to Kansas City, I came for them to bend. Well, I'm not going to bend. So we had a standoff. And we solved it with a little can of that stuff that you correct spelling with. It was just a $3 contract. So it got whited out. Lewis signed it, the guy in Washington never did it. So we put the other thing is, everybody in town had to pull together. There was no division in town. One lady said that the whole town would stink like Hershey's chocolate. And she was wrong, but pretty hard to convince her she was wrong at the time. Everything else that I have to tell you would be anecdotes. And
How did you know to go get them?
Oh, I'm sorry. I had done 40 towns before I got here, economic development consultant. And no one, I think Bobby knows that today. Do you? Anyway, I'd done 40 towns before I got here, and they were all the same. Economic development was exactly the same. Patty and I decided we would like to live in one of the towns where we worked. Montrose was one of them, and Seville was one of them, and Seville almost won out. You know, when you retire, you don't think about where you're going to live, you think about where you're going to die. Anyway, Stovers was going to go to Grand Junction. They were pretty well locked up. But I've been active in student government at the University of Kansas, I might add. And one of our, what do you call them when somebody donates a lot of money to the university? One of our benefactors was Joyce Hall, Hallmark greeting cards. Joyce Hall was on the board of directors of Stovers, a major big investor in Stovers. He was the first one to turn Montrose. And then somebody made a joke at the Kansas City University Club where they ate lunch every month about their candy was going to glow in the dark. Those of you who can't remember, do you remember when they were mining the mill tailings in Grand Junction? Well, he didn't humor him at all. How much well, you got to tell me. Oh, I'm fine. What did you swear words, is that right? Now, the plant was going to go to Grand Junction. We brought it here because we had all the politics going in our favor. And we had a city council. It's the first time I saw a credit card. The council gave me a credit card. Don and Lee, I think, is the one who told me, but They were very gracious. They said, if you get the plant, we'll take credit for it. If you don't get the plant, you're fired. I said, that isn't a joke. Damn serious. It was darn serious. So Stovers came here because of a lot of people working. Let me tell you one more anecdote about it. I'm going to run out of time. There's Charlie. We got a woman that lived between here and Uray, halfway house. You know where the halfway house is? You know where the dam is when you go into Uray? Right across on the left-hand side of the road is a little house. That was the halfway house for the stagecoaches. And we had a woman living there named McCarty. And this guy Postal was almost impossible to deal with. He was the most miserable. He just was miserable. And he said, one night we were out at the Red Barn. Of course we weren't drinking. And he said, why is everybody in this town so darn uncongenial? I said, they just don't like you. He said, well, that's a good answer. And I said, oh, let me take you and show you somebody that you might like to meet. Marge McCarty. They lived in that house, halfway house, so we drove halfway to Uray. And it was about 10 o'clock at night, and she got up in her nightgown, and I said, Marge, would you have the kids sing to this old bastard? She had 3 children, and all of them were singers, and they were just wonderful. So she got all the kids out of bed and came down to sing and started singing. And the old bastard started to cry. Man, that's so. Anyway, you're about out of time. Those of you who lived there a long time didn't know John Bergerella. Remember John? Remember Bergerella? Well, he was the second one. He had. So Postal asked me, what happens when I get a machine that goes down at night and I need a machinist? And I said, you're not going to like it, but you'd have to get a hold of John Bergerella. And so, are we done? So we went in to meet Bergerella. And Postal said, what would happen if I had a machine break down on Saturday night and I had to get it back running by Monday morning? And Bergerella said, I'll tell you to stick it. Or something like that. And so Postal had a taste of 2 people in Montrose within a day of each other that were exact opposites. And I'm done.
Jim has a lot of insights. I was surfing the internet trying to find what I wanted for the introduction today, and there's a couple in Montrose writing a book, and one of the chapters is called The Formative 70s. And as I thought about the 70s, I thought about Ridgway Dam, because that was another in your face with the federal government project that Jim tackled. If you see the Montrose Mouse down by Oxbow, by the coffee shop, that was designed as a result of the Ridgway project, and Jim had the mouse flipping the bird to the federal government. And the gal who, Kay Orton, who was working with the federal government, had a fist raised. But it gave me the idea that maybe we need to have another program where Jim can give the 70s perspective, and then we have someone connected with the dam to tell us its multiple uses now. So I'm working on that for July, and maybe we'll see Jim again. So thank you, Jim. Our main speaker is Chad Huffman. Chad is the Human Resources Manager with Russell Stovers. He has 22 years of experience in human resources at a wide range of places. Right out of college, it was Walt Disney World, then Levi Strauss, Interstate Brands, which I would associate with tires maybe, but it's Hostess Snack Cakes, Deli Medicine, Wonder Bread, that group. Then prior to Russell Stover's, he was with the county, and he was the human resources manager for Montrose County. His wife is Kay Huffman. Julie, sorry, I knew that. Was Julie Huffman. She's an attorney in town. He's married, 3 kids, and a member, he was appointed 2018, is that right, to the City Planning Commission. So it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Chad Huffman.
Thank you for inviting me. So when we were initially contacted to send somebody from Russell Stover as the plant manager, he's not the sort of guy who likes to talk in front of a big group. And he said, Chad, you have fun with this. You go be the public person, which I don't mind doing that. So I'm happy to be here. Happy to tell you about Russell Stover's. For me, it's a happy topic to talk about Russell Stover's. So I'm going to enjoy it. Let me take you a little bit more of the history. So Russell Stover started with Mr. and Mrs. Stover, who originally, 1923, Mrs. Stover's Bungalow Candy in Denver. We know exactly where the house is. The house is no longer there, obviously. It's been developed into other properties. But that's where they were living, and they were making and packaging candy from their home. So in 1969, Mr. Lewis Ward bought the company from Mrs. Stover. So what had happened is Mr. Russell Stover had died, and Lewis Ward had owned and operated the box company that supplied all the boxes to the Russell Stover company. And so when Mr. Russell Stover died, Mrs. Stover went to Lewis Ward and said, hey, Lewis, I'm done with the company. Do you want to buy? And so you'll own the box side of the business, you'll own the chocolate side of the business. And Lewis Ward knew he had a good opportunity to take a small regional candy company and turn it into something much, much bigger. And he happily bought the chocolate side of the business from the Russell Stover wife. And that's how the Lewis Ward family got involved. The Lewis Ward family, as you heard, is from Kansas City, Missouri. Very big, loyal KU fans. I hear about KU all the time, even with the Ward family gone. Ultimately, in the early 90s, they acquired the Whitman's Chocolate Company. The Whitman's Chocolate Company was in horrible financial shape, and Lewis Ward came in and bought the label. Didn't buy the factories, or at least closed, was ready to move on from the factories. And so this was the biggest heyday for the Montrose Russell Stovers, because in the early 90s, that's when our employment numbers peaked. And we were up to about 700 employees at that point when they acquired Whitman's. And they were doing a lot of the Whitman's production right here in Montrose. Even to this day, all the Whitman's, not all the Whitman's, a lot of the Whitman's comes from the Montrose facility. And to be bluntly honest with you, it's the exact same candy as the Russell Stover box. The only thing that you'll find different is it'll be decorated a little bit different, and the box, the sampler box, will of course always have a bigger sample size in it, just because it is the sampler. Now, just today's all a little bit about fun stories, and so let me tell you about this little box. And by the way, I've got 2 of these right here, and so pass these around. This is a little box that the company gives to the White House. They've been doing it for decades. And it's what we call a 2-ounce box, because it's got 4 pieces of chocolate in it. Those 4 pieces of chocolate add up to be 2 ounces of chocolate. But we give these to the White House, and if you're an official state visitor, you are potentially given one of these as a gift from the White House. And again, it all starts with Montrose, where we're not selling them to the White House, we are truly giving them. So, fun story, during the Obama administration, we get a phone call from somebody who claims to be the Secret Service. If somebody calls you at home and says that they're from the Secret Service, you go, yeah, right you are. And that's exactly how we responded, by saying, yeah, right, you're the Secret Service. And we pretty much hung up on them. And then they called back and said, no, we really, really are the Secret Service. And so we gave them the corporate number and said, if you can convince corporate that you're the Secret Service, then we'll take your word for it. Well, they called the corporate office, they convinced them, the corporate office eventually calls us back and says, yes, this really was the Secret Service, they want to talk to you. The fear was at that point, that, let's just say Jim Austin was going to get a job at Russell Stover's Candy to poison these boxes that are going to be in the White House so that he could deep down poison Mr. Obama. That was deep down their fear about what was going on, that there was going to be some scheme where somebody was going to get a job in an attempt to poison Mr. Obama by poisoning these boxes. And they wanted us to do a Secret Service level background check on every single employee who we hired. Now, I don't know if you've worked with the government, but sometimes they're not efficient. And so we laughed and said, no, we're not going to do that. You know, it can take about a month plus to do a Secret Service level background check to hire every single employee. By the way, currently today we have 400 employees. I'll talk more about that later. But realistically, we knew that we were not going to do that. And so we invited them into the factory, and we wanted to see them how ridiculous it was, that it was next to impossible for Jim Austin or any employee to poison Mr. Obama. And what happens is, if you go into our factory, we have what we call a steel. And it's about the size of a steel filing cabinet. And it's got shelves, and I'm going to show you a picture of one eventually. And we've got hundreds of steels throughout the factory, and it's all pre-made candy, so that it's pre-made where we can just pull whatever steel we want, and we can start packing boxes of candy. And our comment to the Secret Service was, if somebody was going to poison Mr. Obama with these boxes, they would have to poison all this candy, and somebody else is going to get hurt a whole lot faster than Mr. Obama. But most important, we're not going to do it. So if you want free candy, you're welcome to it. If you don't want free candy, well then that's fine, we won't give it to you. And if you notice, we are still packing these boxes, so the federal government, you know, the Obama administration realized maybe it wasn't such a scary risk for Mr. Obama. But yeah, those boxes are coming around. So in the early 90s also, that was a box of Russell Stover chocolate that Forrest Gump was carrying around. It was a 1.5 pound box of chocolate. It did give the company a nice boost in sales at that point, because it reminded you that if you're in trouble with your wife, it's a nice gift to give to her just to get yourself out of the doghouse. Later in 1999, the Lewis Ward family, or Russell Stovers, acquired Pagburn Chocolate. Pagburn Chocolate was a Texas company, and they're famous for their Pagburn Millionaires. Pagburn Millionaires is just like what we at Russell Stovers make, associated with a pecan delight. Pecans, caramel, chocolate, covered in chocolate. Some people might also call it a turtle, but we don't call it that because that's a whole different name brand. Ours is much better, if you ask me. But we also acquired Pagburns, and Pagburns is also a pretty old chocolate company that was acquired as they were having financial issues. Then, as was alluded to by Jim, Russell Stover's was sold by the Ward family. So the Ward family was generation number 1. Generation number 2 was Tom Ward, his brother Scott, and there was also a sister who was minorly involved, but it was primarily Scott and Tom Ward were the sons of Lewis Ward, the original first generation. Well, their public excuse or their public reasoning was that the third generation, the grandkids of Lewis Ward, none of them were interested in running the company. So they all theoretically had their other pursuits in life. And so they had a choice, either hire a CEO to come in and run Russell Stover Chocolate, or they could go ahead and sell the company. And at the time, 2012, 2013, etc., we were having record sales. And so they were smart folks, and they said, you know what, if we're ever going to sell, it's a great time to sell when we're having record sales nationwide. And so yes, they listed us. The 2 highest bidders were Lindt Chocolate and Hershey's. Both bid basically equal amounts of money, and the Ward family chose Lindt Chocolate primarily because for decades Hershey's had been the biggest competitor, and the Lewis Ward, actually Tom Ward and brother Scott, wanted nothing to do with the idea of Hershey's now owning Russell Stover Chocolate after they had been competing for all these many years. The sales price was $1.6 billion with a big, no, I'm sorry, $1.65 billion with a B. The Ward family is very well off. There were 2 corporate jets. They decided, oh, we're just going to keep those. And so that $1.65 billion did not include the 2 corporate jets which the family kept from the overall sale. But yeah, we are now a Swiss company. So Swiss, it's actually Lindt Chocolate Sprungli. Whatever Sprungli is, I don't know. But Lindt chocolate also owns Ghirardelli chocolate. And both Lindt and Ghirardelli is considered a premium chocolate, where we are considered an everyday chocolate. And so what they were trying to do is just expand to a different type of customer, that if you're not willing to splurge on the premium chocolate this one particular time, that you're still willing to buy chocolate, whether you're still buying a Lindt product. Originally, the first few years, Lindt was not very involved in us at all. They were just sitting back and watching, letting us have complete control. But every week, every month, it's dramatically increased with how Lindt is now getting involved more and more and more into Russell Stovers. It was interesting. People on the board started being replaced. People in CEO-related positions were getting replaced with Lindt people, and they definitely, you can feel the Lindt difference compared to the Lewis Ward difference dramatically here at the factory and across the company. And it's a good thing. They're moving us forward. They're investing money where ultimately Lewis Ward, or actually more of Tom and Scott, the two sons, Tom and Scott were not investing a lot of money in the company. Everything was running smooth, and the two gentlemen were known as for being pretty tight with every single dollar. And if there wasn't some very close, they were just very conservative. And so Lindt has been willing to spend a whole lot more money. So ultimately, we're happy with the overall results. So some details about the factory. 265,000 square feet, the equivalent of 4.6 football fields. Ultimately, it is a 1.5 story building. If you drive by, there is a second story up there. Originally, that half story, the second story is covers about half the building. And originally, we were never producing chocolate or doing any production. It was all storage upstairs. But eventually, at this point, we've moved into every corner of that building, and there is an additional storage-related building on the back, and that storage building on the back does include the 265,000. But we now use and utilize every single ounce or square inch of space inside. And we are the smallest of the 4 factories that Russell Stover's has. We are the oldest factory, and we're the smallest of the factories. The other 3 factories, 2 of them in Kansas. So Iowa, Kansas, which is middle of nowhere, southeast Kansas, and then Abilene, Kansas, which is right on the interstate. You've driven by the Russell Stover factory many times. Maybe you didn't realize it, but it's right there on the interstate in Abilene. And then the 4th factory is Corsicana, Texas. It's the newest one. Don't ask me when it was built, but yeah, it's the newest factory. Within our factory, we have 2 sugar silos. Originally, I was always told that we were the last users of the railroad tracks coming into town. And we no longer use those railroad tracks. It was an agreement with the city. About a decade ago, we abandoned our rail spur rights. And being blunt, truck delivery is way more dependable in a timeliness fashion than a rail. Hope nobody here is from the rail industry. But yeah, we just found the rail industry to be very last minute when it comes to delivering product, and so we have switched over to truck delivery. So when you see a silver, stainless steel silver truck that you think of as delivering gasoline, that very well could be powdered sugar. It's a confectioner sugar inside that truck. The trucks look the same is what my point is, whether it's delivering gasoline or it's delivering sugar. Our sugar, by the way, comes from the Windsor, Brighton area, where we do source all of our granulated sugar locally, or Colorado locally. And then the liquid sugar comes from Illinois. In liquid sugar, we have 2 additional silos. I couldn't get the square forward, the gallon capacity of those 2 silos, but we have 2 additional silos. And that just is, again, a reflection of how much sugar we really, really use. Yeah, we have ultimately 4 silos for different types of sugars. The freezer. So if you look at our building, on the far left-hand side of the building, it's white compared to the rest of the building is all red. And that white section is a huge freezer. Now, I've always been told when that freezer was originally built, it was the largest freezer in the entire state of Colorado. Today, it's been exceeded by other freezers, but again, at that point, it was the biggest in the state. It is the size of an entire football field. We have 3 to 4 forklifts driving around in that freezer continuously for 2 different shifts. So 20 hours a day, we've got multiple forklifts driving around. It does stay at 0 degrees year-round. So we start making Valentine's Day candy an entire year ahead of Valentine's. So, and that's a reflection of the sheer volume of Valentine's Day candy that is made by Russell Stover Chocolate and has to be shipped. We have to start making it that early, and it thus gets frozen. So, at 0 degrees, the candy is so frozen solid, that's where it's substantially slows down the aging process. Nuts are the item that will age the fastest within the candy industry, or the candy ingredients, where a nut will start to sweat out its oils. And when the nut sweats out its oils, it tastes stale. And so at 0 degrees, those oils are so frozen solid that they're not even sweating out their oils. So it's a fun experience in the middle of July to walk into the freezer year-round, including in the middle of July, because they spend hours at a time in that freezer. So chocolate tempering. Once the chocolate comes to us, and by the way, we don't make our own chocolate, we're a candy company. So we buy our chocolate from multiple other companies. This is how our chocolate comes to us. This is a 10-pound bar of chocolate. This particular one came from Cargill, who's our dark chocolate supplier. And Blommer is our milk chocolate supplier. And so, again, we're a candy company, which is the center of the candy, covered in chocolate, the whole concoction together. But when those things come to us, we then grind them, and then they get put into a huge tank that's actually in the basement of the facility. And within that room, it can be 114 degrees. So think about the extremes of 114 degrees for the chocolate, and then you have 0 degrees for the freezer. That's a pretty big extreme. So, my fun question for you is, what is our monthly utility cost to run the factory? Any ideas? Any numbers? Somebody?
$3,000.
Go higher, much higher, dramatically higher. What's that?
Yeah.
What, much higher?
50,000.
Higher.
100.
Even higher. 114, oh, it's not on the next slide. $114,000 per month is our total utility cost. That's natural gas, that's electricity, that's water, etc. But $114,000 per month on average. And we are the #2 biggest user of DMEA. #1 user is the one remaining coal mine up in the Delta County area. Yeah, that's us. Okay, so candy production started in November of 1973 with a little more than 200 pounds produced that very first year. We just had one of our almost original employees retire. His name was Jeff. He was a mechanic. He joined Russell Stover's a few weeks after high school, and he had been with us he was not in the original batch of employees hired, but he was right after it. And so whenever Russell Stover had an anniversary, he was having an anniversary. And he finally just retired. So at this point, again, the factory has been producing for 45 years. This November, it'll be 46. Our oldest, actually, that's on a different slide. Our longest term employee at this point is 43 years, who's still been with us that long. Let's see, today, an exceptional day. And this is exceptional, but we'll hit 100,000 pounds of chocolate that we will produce in one day. And this will still happen 2 or 3 times every single year where we'll hit 100,000 pounds. And that's just the perfect mix of something that's just really, really heavy. If we're making marshmallow that day, we're never ever going to meet that quota, because 100 marshmallow is just way too light. Our highest production year was back in the early 90s when we acquired Whitman's, and that was 17 million pounds is what we accomplished that year. But usually we will average about 13-ish pounds. 13 million pounds is our average production each year. So, raw milk. In the early 70s, when they built the factory, they could not source the various different milk or cream products that we needed to make chocolate. And so, at that point, they built a milk processing plant on the side of the factory. Of the 4 factories, we all need milk, but we are the only factory that has that milk processing plant. The other 3 factories don't want to touch it. It's kind of an ugly process and a dangerous process to be responsible for processing raw milk. But we still process that raw milk because we've got the equipment and we've got the knowledge in the building. And so we pull in raw milk between 1 and 2 loads every single week to process raw milk. During summer, we actually have to bring in more raw milk. We are producing more, but also the raw milk has more water in it from the cows. Think of it as moist grass compared to dry hay. And so there's more moisture coming from the cows that we have to take off of the milk to get to our cream products. And so, yeah, we actually get more milk in the summer because of the difference. So within the building, we have 7 different production lines making different chocolate products. And then within those 7, they're feeding different areas of the factory. Let me check and make sure I'm not going too slow. Okay, I need to go fast. We have 7 different production lines. We have 3 Delta candy wrappers. What does that mean? The Delta wrapper is where we individually wrap a piece of chocolate. And so we don't wrap chocolate by hand. It's all run by a machine. And you're going to actually see photos of that, of the short video of that later. We have 2 baggers. Bagger individually wrapped pieces of candy, then go into a big bag, and then that bag is hanging on your shelf at Walmart, etc. And so we have 2 baggers, and we have 1 mogul, which is how we make formed candy or kind of holiday candy. If you wanted something shaped like a pumpkin, we take and the simple idea is we have a tray full of cornstarch. We take a press that pushes down into that cornstarch, and that cornstarch becomes the mold. And then we pump caramel or marshmallow or strawberry nougat, whatever it happens to be. We pour it into that void that is created in that cornstarch, and as that caramel or marshmallow sets up, that takes on the shape of the mold, and that becomes the center of the piece of candy. And if we have time, or if you stay late, I'll show you a picture or a video of that machine working. But again, that's how we create more of our novelties, or formed candy. We have 6 different packing lines, 3 of them for boxed chocolate, which is what is on your table. Then 2 of them that do those small 2-ounce boxes, and then 1 of them is packing the novelty boxes. All of those don't run at the same time. They run at different points. Employees. So our largest number of employees was 700 employees back in again when we acquired Whitman's. Currently, we're between 400 and 475, and that's just a reflection of the number of seasonal employees we'll bring on. And I'll explain that in a second. So we operate on 2 shifts. So most of our employees get the opportunity to work 4-day weeks, Monday through Thursday, and then they have Friday, Saturday, Sunday off, which is real attractive. You get, in the first week, it's kind of hard to work 10-hour days for some employees if they've never done it before, but after a while, that becomes easy, and they appreciate, obviously, having Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. But then once we get into our busy season, we can add in overtime, and we can add in going from 4 days up to 5 days really, really easy. And employees, either with their families still going to school, doing everything else on Fridays, so they don't mind, and they appreciate that overtime on the Fridays. And then when we get really busy, we'll add in Saturdays. And there's always one department that makes those novelties. They will end up doing Sundays, 1 or 2 Sundays, pretty much every single year, where we'll peak into 7 days for just, again, roughly 2 weeks. And we try to avoid it with, like the plague, but it just happens. So, a lot of people think of factory work as, you can't do it as an older person. I disagree. We have roughly 14% of our employees who are 65 and older. I have one 80-year-old who works in the factory, although she's going to retire in about a week plus. She's going to finally quit. So yeah, I've got multiple 75-year-olds, multiple 65 and older folks. I've got a lot of longevity in the factory. Again, about roughly 23% of the overall employee group have been there for 25 years or longer. And, well, we talked about, Jeff retired. But yeah, our current longest employee is 43 years. So, wages. Walking in the door, somebody in a production position. Somebody in a production position is going to make $12 an hour. Within 9 months, they're going to be at $14.40, and that's where they're going to stay most of the time. And let me be specific. About 60% of our positions are making $14.40 as their hourly rate on an ongoing basis, $14.40. That's 60%. The other 40% I would call bid positions, and those bid positions are going to make different rates. For example, a very common bid rate for one of our candy makers, the candy maker is the person mixing the candy in the kitchen, they're going to make $17.35 is the new rates. New rate as of June 1, basically. And then we have higher wages for mechanics. Currently, I need 30 more positions that'll be year-round positions, and then I need another 50 people who will be seasonal. Seasonal will realistically be August through December, because we have that push associated with Valentine's Day candy. But this is probably the biggest factor that influences the challenge for Russell Stovers here in Montrose, and I assume as you talk to other employers, the challenge for other business owners is getting people, getting good people, getting people who will actually show up to work. Really, to hire these 80 people, we'll end up hiring well over 80 because multiple folks won't show up to work, they won't show up timely, they'll just disappear, and that is the challenge of this very good economy that's happening right now. And that's again where my seniors who are over the age of 65, I love them to death. I just hired a new electrician, and when he was interviewing, he was very timid, and he said, and of course we didn't ask this, but he said, I'm 63 years old, but I still want to continue to work. He said, I don't care, I'm just thrilled that you got some great electrical experience that he wants to bring to the factory. And so, solid, dependable folks who can show up on a daily basis, that's the real key. If your grandchild says they can't find a job, they're lying to you. There are tons of jobs in this town if you want them. We never stop hiring mechanics. That's a fact. There are not enough mechanics in this community. We've talked to CMU, we've talked to Western Colorado Community College, the tech school in Delta. They do the automotive repair, but nobody does industrial maintenance. And that's the problem. If you have a grandson or granddaughter also who's mechanically inclined, doesn't want to go to college, at least send them. There's some great schools over in Pueblo or Denver to become industrial maintenance, and it's needed everywhere throughout the nation, including right here in Montrose, by multiple employers. Employees. So this is the big number that's always important. In pure wages, and that's just counting the pure wages, we're bringing roughly $13 to $15 million to the community every single year. I bet this battery is going bad. That's my suspicion.
We've got more.
Okay. Yeah, so between 13 and 15. All of our employees, by the way, at day 60, their health insurance kicks in if they want health insurance. Of course, they still have to pay a portion for their health insurance, but it is available to them. And, one of the other unique things that most people don't realize is our production and mechanic employees are represented by a union. So for the best of my knowledge, there's only roughly 3 unions here in town. The teachers have a union, the tri-state employees have a union, and then Russell Stover production employees have a union. And that's where I come in. Ultimately, all of my prior experience, except for the county, had been in a union environment where I'm just representing the company as we work through those union challenges and the union relationship. Bakery, confectionery, tobacco workers is what that represents, bakery, confectionery, tobacco workers, and grain millers. Local 26 out of Denver. We are the only major employer on the western slope, so honestly, they don't come over here very often. We're the only open shop, by the way. So here in Colorado, you can do a closed shop or an open shop, meaning you're required to join the union in a closed shop, or an open shop means you have a choice. Our employees have a choice on if they want to join, and that was actually their decision. In the early 90s, when the union was organized, there was 2 votes. The first vote is, do you want to have a union? And the employees as a group said, yes, we want the union. The next vote, and which is unique to Colorado, do you want to require everybody to participate? And our employees in the early 90s said, no, we don't want to require everybody to. Now, also what's unique is about 6 to 9 months ago, that second vote was repeated right here in our factory. And so the union did organize a second vote to basically say, hey, the union wanted to close the shop where it required everybody to join the union. And so they brought in the state of Colorado, and the state of Colorado did a secret ballot voting process in our training room. And as a whole, it was overwhelming by our employees. They like having the union, but they want to still have it be optional that they can join or they can not join. So our facility continues to be an open shop, which again, if you want to pay dues to the union, you're welcome to do so. If you don't want to, they don't have to. So one of the big the things that we have to stress to employees, you want to eat clean candy when you're eating that box of chocolates. And so I'm going to show you about a dozen slides. And during new employee orientation, it's a 7-hour process. And we talk about GMPs, good manufacturing processes, or good manufacturing practices. We talk about it. Then we'll talk about different issues of the factory. Then we'll talk about GMPs, because we want to remind them about cleanliness. Then we talk about different things, health and safety. Then we talk about GMPs again, and then we'll talk about a third issue, like evacuating the building because of a fire fire alarm. Then we talk about GMPs again because we want to reiterate over and over and over different things that are necessary associated with GMPs and making sure that the candy is clean and that you would want to eat it and your grandkids would want to eat it. And any way we can get through to them associated with what the expectations are and what to do and what not to do to make sure that it is clean. You know, nobody wants to find a false eyelash inside of your candy. Just because you're wearing gloves does not mean your hands are automatically clean. You can have dirty gloves also. Come on. Okay, so a little bit more of the history, and we're getting down to the last 10 minutes, but really, really quick here. A little bit more of the history. This is how we originally used to make candy. And so imagine a line of primarily ladies who would sit in this particular position, and this is, those pipes are literally, we have this black pipe all over the factory, and we pipe chocolate throughout the building. And you touch those pipes, and you think of it as a cold water pipe, but no, it's nice and warm because of the hot chocolate that's flowing through them. And one of those is for a dark chocolate, one of them is for the traditional milk chocolate. And depending on if the employee is dipping milk chocolate or dark, a different pipe. But this tray would be full of the center of the candy. Just imagine caramel, etc. And they hand dip every single piece of chocolate. And then they go on this tray, gets pushed backwards, or a different employee would then take those trays away. And again, this is how candy used to be made. And again, whole line of ladies sitting in these chairs doing that job. Realistically, oh, this is what the steel looks like. This is how we store it. And each steel has these 2 rows, and there's a lot of chocolate in each one of those steels, and we have hundreds of those. Now, everybody always remembers this scene. Everybody who comes to the factory always wants to talk about Lucille Ball. And so this is to me what the I Love Lucy moment is in our Russell Stover factory. Imagine you've got this much chocolate coming at you. And that's what it really looks like today when we're manufacturing chocolate. So let me show you this video. And so the candy's going through a metal detector for any weird things that could have gotten into the candy. The belt breaks open and dumps that candy into a big bin. The belt gets faster, and it's going to one of those deltas that's going to individually wrap these pieces of candy. And so it's getting all the pieces lined up in a single file line, basically. So these are all now individually wrapped. A whole lot faster than Lucille Ball ever packed. This belt then continues on around and then feeds one of our baggers automatically so that we don't have to haul the chocolate. It just travels across this room to a bagger. And again, the bag is where we take all this individually wrapped candy and drop it into a bag. Here we're inspecting, looking for empty wrappers. Because if you get an empty wrapper in your bag, you feel like you got cheated, right? So that's what she's doing. But then it makes it up this conveyor belt. At the moment, this conveyor is not actually running at this very moment of the filming, but it goes across that conveyor and over across the room to that big white thing, which is the bagger. So that's about all I've got for you, unless there are more videos that you all want to watch, which I can happily show you. But are there any questions before I just show you more videos to take up time? You bet.
What percent of that employees are members of the union?
I am very proud of the fact that it is low 40%. And I call that a proud thing because that means that we're doing something right by treating employees well, in my opinion.
Where do you get your chocolate?
Where does the chocolate truly come from? Again, the two companies, I know the two companies, Blommer and then Cargill, but where the physical property, I don't know where it comes from. I know it's somewhere overseas, but that's all I know. Yeah, sorry.
So what is the bloom on chocolate?
What is the bloomer chocolate?
That's your storage.
And one more time?
The bloom, when the chocolate turns white from storage.
It's what is the bloom? Yeah, so if the chocolate is not tempered well, and tempering, a simple way of the idea of tempering is cooking of the oils within chocolate. And if it's overheated, it can turn gray. And that's just where it turns gray. It loses some of the flavor. It just doesn't look as nice. And it is just cooking off, or cooking and boiling, not really boiling, but you hurt those oils within, the natural oils within the chocolate. And so we have two people, one on each shift. Chuck Gregory, for example, is our guy on first shift he takes that job with a ton of pride. And if he's grinding chocolate and taking care of the chocolate, it's perfect. It's always when he's gone, the other person who fills in does a bad job. But otherwise, that's what can sometimes happen. Also, if chocolate is, we put it into the freezer, we take it out of the freezer. If it's not given full time to fully de-thaw before we stick it back into the freezer, that can also cause issues where it can start to turn gray.
Yeah, in the area of rumors and propaganda, I had heard that the reason why the plant was established here had to do with altitude and the cracking of creams.
Yes. Yeah, so creams and chocolate cherries, chocolate dipped cherries. Originally, so what happens is you can take a high altitude piece of chocolate and bring it to a low altitude, but if you took a low altitude piece of chocolate and then send it over the Continental Divide, it will crack by the time it gets to California. And so the whole idea is that we can make this high altitude chocolate, send it to either side of the Rocky Mountains, and it's going to survive. That is true. At this point, for example, chocolate-covered cherries are now made at the Abilene factory. We don't make a single chocolate-covered cherry anymore because they've perfected the process. And ultimately, creams, they call it 95% perfected the process, where most of them survive. So the altitude is no longer a necessity for making chocolate. Right now, our chocolate primarily goes to the West Coast, and that's simply the smart logistics of shipping, that we are the farthest factory west. And so most of our stuff goes west. A few of our things go nationwide, but only a few. We make a lot of sugar-free chocolate. So sugar-free chocolate continues to grow for the company nationwide. And yeah, we have one production line of sugar-free that just never stops. And if we're ever doing overtime, there's good odds that it's the sugar-free line that's doing overtime. But again, most of our stuff just goes to the West Coast at this point. But there is some stuff that's made in, say, Abilene that also comes over to the West Coast, all the way to we have a big freezer distribution center for Russell Stover chocolate just outside of San Francisco, east of San Francisco, but in the general area. And it's combined with both Lindt and Ghirardelli chocolate and our Russell Stover chocolate. It distributes all three. And again, at this point, that altitude isn't such a big issue.
Do you get any inkling that Lindt is not invested in Montrose, or do you see the opposite happen in terms of pulling out?
That's always the question, and the best question that always comes up. And if you ask my plant manager, he'll joke, and he's been with the company for 25 years, and he'll tell you that for the last 25 years, he's heard the rumor that next year the company is going to close. And again, that's the rumor that is always floating around. So within the total amount of sales for Russell Stover chocolate, they have to have our factory. Now, if they built a fifth factory somewhere, I would be scared to death. But they have to have our factory to satisfy the volume that is being sold across the nation. There are certain products that are clearly growing, like bagged candy, what we call everyday candy, which is all of those bagged items. And we do the bagged items in sugar-free along with other things. That is growing. Box chocolate, like those, is slowly dying across the whole chocolate industry. If Jim is in trouble, there's lots of other ways for him to give a gift to his wife rather than just a box of chocolate. And so, yeah, that concept in our society is becoming less popular. But that's where we are. Yeah, our baggers are running continuously solid year-round. We had overtime in certain seasons that we would never have overtime. Same with our mogul. The company has 3 moguls, and the mogul is again how we make that shaped candy. So the company has 3. We have 1 here in Montrose, and then there's 2 moguls in Iowa, Kansas. And our mogul still runs very solid. In February, it'll slow down a little bit just because we truly don't need the capacity 100% year-round. But for the most part, the mogul is also very dependable. And so those are the types of candy that the company is pushing. Within the organization, we're pushing everyday chocolate. Now, the biggest challenge for us, back to mechanics. If I can't find mechanics to maintain the factory, they're never going to give us more equipment. And it's the issue of, do we have to train our own? And yeah, we take an automotive mechanic, and we will happily train them at this point into being a industrial maintenance mechanic. Because at least that automotive mechanic has shown that they have the aptitude of being a mechanic. We'll teach them the electrical side. We'll teach them repairing pumps, which heck, they might have already learned when it comes to repairing automotive. So we do a lot of in-house training. But that is still the biggest challenge, is finding mechanics. And if you don't have mechanics, they won't invest money in us. Is my biggest push that I'm always looking to keep those mechanic positions filled. I don't want to send any weird signals that we can't take care of our factory. So, no, I don't picture Russell Stover's closing anytime. I'm going to be without a job just like everybody else.
So, do you recruit mechanics from outside the area?
We recruit in every quirky manner possible, whether we're going back to the good community colleges that have programs. We will recruit at those particular colleges. We will recruit in other communities, like Pueblo is famous for having a higher unemployment rate.
And pay for relocation?
We will pay for relocation for mechanic. Your average production employee, no way. But mechanic, absolutely. That's how bad, I don't want to say we do them badly, but there's continuous need. And a lot of my mechanics are in their 60s. And that's my biggest fear. I've got to have replacement young kids that are coming in if we're going to continue to operate a factory. And those kids have got to be taking on those mechanic skills.
That's it. Thank you, Chad, for doing this. For the chocolates, for the entertainment. This was really a pleasant morning. Next week, almost afraid to announce this one.